In the heartland of Illinois, surrounded by fields, stands a building with a story to tell. A story steeped in history, mystery, and the whispers of forgotten souls. This is Ashmore Estates, a place where the walls truly can talk, for you just have to listen. The story of Ashmore Estates predates the American Civil War by 4 years. In 1857, long before Ashmore Estates, there was the Coles County Poor Farm. The Coles County Poor Farm was located in the Charleston Township. This building served as a haven for the poor, handicapped, and the mentally ill. In 1870, the county purchased 260 acres of land in Section 35 of the Ashmore Township. On this land, they built a new poor farm. This newly constructed timber and brick building was constructed by H.B. Truman. This was the first building built on the property. It was 38 by 58 feet and 2 stories tall. This farm was home to many. The people who called it home were referred as inmates. From 1870 to 1879, there were about 250 inmates who passed through the farm. About 32 of these inmates died at the farm. The dead were buried in a cemetery on the north end of the property. This location is now believed to be near a tree located in the north end of the Ashmore Estates property. This area marks the unmarked resting place for the souls of many unnamed inmates. A pauper cemetery was established. This cemetery still stands today, just south of Route 16. Between 600 to 100 souls are buried here, including the well-known Ashmore Estates legend, Joe Bluxom. In 1880, the farm housed as many as 56 residents. In the same year, tragedy struck the poor farm, claiming the life of a little girl. Elva Ladusky Skinner passed away just less than 2 weeks before her 5th birthday on February 15, 1880. Elva was getting dressed when the flames came in contact with her clothing. She passed away due to burns. Elva's mother and sister left the farm the day after her passing. It is said that Elva's spirit is still at Ashmore Estates, looking for her mother. Elva is laid to rest at the Ashmore Cemetery. By the early 1900s, the living conditions on the farm were going downhill. According to the findings of the Board of State Commissioners of Public Charities, individuals who suffered from mental illnesses received little to no specialized care. These individuals were not subjected to confinement or restraints, which is a common practice at the time. By 1911, the poor farm was condemned because of its walls infested with vermin, rough floors, small and poorly ventilated windows, and flies that contaminated the food. This was not the end of the Coles County Poor Farm, however. In 1915, the state of Illinois initiated the process of seeking bids for the replacement of the structure. The building contract was first awarded to S.C. Saylor of Oakwood, Illinois. However, he did back out of the project late February 1916. In March of 1916, the contract was then granted to J.W. Montgomery for $20,389. In today's money, that would be $580,480. The cornerstone was laid during a ceremony on May 17, 1916. This was the start of the building that we now know as Ashmore Estates. The original layout was 2 stories tall with 16 rooms on each floor. The building was divided in 2 sections as it was important to separate the sexes at the time. The building had 8 rooms on either floor, including bathrooms for each gender. There was a large living room on the lower floor of each section. In the basement were separate men and women's dining rooms, along with a kitchen, laundry room, storage room, and a boiler room. This almshouse housed anywhere between 18 to 56 inmates, with the numbers typically higher during the winter months. This was a working farm, however. Those who were able to were put to work.
Everybody did have a job out here, so it was a working farm. They, grew their own crops, butchered their own animals, had different workshop buildings. It was kind of like their own little city.
This almshouse was known for its self-sufficiency, as it sat on 267 acres of fine land. They were able to produce most of their food through the cultivation of crops, butchering, and smoking their own meats in the smokehouse. In 1921, a few years after the second almshouse opened up, Joe Bluxom, a resident at the building that still stands today, met his fate.
So Joe Bluxom, probably one of our most famous spirits, definitely one of the people on our portrait, I guess, or painting that we have. He was a person who was here during the poor farm. He was a mentally challenged individual who was here, who hangs out kind of in the maintenance room and the boiler room area. He came and go as he pleased, and one of his trips on the way back to the building, unfortunately, he was hit by a train.
After the accident, he was able to get back to the farm thanks to a passing motorist who dropped him off at the gates. Immediately, the superintendent, Harvey Regal, contacted doctors, but Bluxom passed away from his injuries the following morning, June 1st, 1921. Joseph Bluxom was buried at the Coles County Poor Farm Cemetery, which is south of Route 16. Bluxom is a well-known spirit at Ashmore Estates. 7 years later, another resident at the farm met a similar fate to Joe Bluxom. This resident was 80 years old. His name was John Cross. His story was not as well known as Bluxom's, but just as tragic. Cross was an inmate of the poor farm since the spring of 1916. As he was walking one day, 3 miles east of Charleston, he was struck and killed. Cross was known as being a difficult inmate to handle. Without getting caught, he was able to walk away from the poor farm and travel westwards. Shortly after his disappearance, Superintendent Sam Jones started to search for the man. Superintendent Jones caught sight of him, but before Jones was able to get to him, Cross was picked up by a motorist and sped off westwards. As Cross was returning back to the poor farm, he was walking along the Big Four right-of-way. Transfixed by the fright, the man stood still and was struck. His body then dropped into the river, which was 56 feet below the bridge. His body hit a log that was halfway submerged. As rescuers made their way to the river, they found that every bone in John Cross's body had been broken or crushed. In 1959, Ashmore Estates LLC took over, and the property then transformed into a specialized facility for the mentally disabled. This was a private psychiatric hospital. The public was often invited to open houses at the hospital by Ashmore Estates medical director, Dr. Roger Arnold. There were many rumors that portrayed the hospital as a terrible place. However, the reality was much different. Residents were able to compete in poetry competitions, singing, dancing, reading, and holiday activities. They were also not trapped in the hospital, as camping trips were taken during good weather and residents' birthdays were celebrated at restaurants. This hospital did not stay open long, though. The hospital was closed down in 1964 due to debt. Staff for the psychiatric hospital was released in 1964 as well. The personnel for the board of directors remained the same, as they decided to change their focus from being a private hospital to one that took in patients from other mental institutions. They were also granted a license by the state to be a shelter for the aged. By 1968, Ashmore Estates was home to 49 residents. Paul Swinford and Galen Martini purchased a former institution in July of 1976. They invested more than $200,000 in the construction of a modern addition onto the old building after the State Planning Committee refused to approve their plan after considering it for 6 months. Construction started in 1977 and was not finished until the 1980s. The addition added 12 rooms to the building, and the building was brought up to code. During the process of the renovation, there was a lot of conflict. On May 2, 1979, the state said the estate must close. At this time, the estate was home to 36 mentally ill men and women who needed immediate care. The Illinois Department of Public Health found 22 violations of the Life Safety Code. A Coles County social service representative said that these problems were related to the renovation project they had been working on for 2 years. The order stated a 5-bed dormitory room contained no lighting besides the light that came from the bedroom doorway. Other things mentioned was peeling paint, exposed wiring, and an absence of fire exit doors and fire extinguishers. Ashmore Estates was then granted 120 days to complete repairs and remodeling. Through periodic inspections, in October, Judge Joseph Spitt gave the owners an additional month to complete the repairs. In November of 1979, Joseph Spitz revoked the State Health Department's order to close the institution. This ruling was based on the state's inspection that showed the home's condition had improved. The state's inspectors felt the building could be in compliance with the regulations by January 1st of 1979. Things for Ashmore Estates started to turn around in 1981. The home was granted for a temporary license to operate. Barbara Clark, the new administrator at the home, knew the biggest thing to overcome would be getting the rest of the world to look past the checkered history of the building. An open house was set, and life was brought back into Ashmore Estates. Things went south just a few years later. In 1984, Ashmore Estates was facing possibly having their license revoked after a routine health department inspection. After inspecting the home on June 21st, they cited 54 health code violations in which residents were neglected or abused. The inspection led to the discovery of 31 alleged violations concerning the conditions, procedures, and activities at the home, as well as 23 violations related to sanitation. Alleged violations inside the home includes failure to properly report the mental abuse of a resident, the failure to report an employee who sold marijuana to residents, the failure to report the sexual intercourse between an employee and a female resident, where the patient was told she would receive $10 for going along with the activities, and an employee who instigated a cute-ass contest in which both employees and residents were to drop their pants. The condition of the home was overwhelming. Privacy curtains in the bathroom were smeared with feces and blood. The bathroom contained no toilet paper or paper towels. Rust and slime were found in the showers, and used sanitary napkins were around in various places. In the kitchen, a grease hood that covered the stove was found to contain maggots and cockroaches. However, it was not just in the kitchen. The home was cited for having an abundance of flies and cockroaches throughout the building. Other sanitation violations included delay in doing laundry, a housekeeper who did heavy cleaning and then prepared food without changing her clothes, and a urinal which was overflowing into a resident's shoe. Health incidents include a medicine cup which contained mouse poison, patients who were wrongly restrained, and a low supply of food. Owner Paul Swinford said the allegations were false. The home's administrator, Roger David, said the conditions were safe. However, they both declined to discuss the allegations further. Despite the efforts to keep Ashmore Estates running, in 1987, the residents were moved to other facilities, and Ashmore Estates closed as a residential facility for good. 3 years later, in 1990, Paul Swinford and Tennessee Company Corrections Corporations of America attempted to turn Ashmore Estates into a home for juveniles. On December 18th, the Ashmore Village Board rejected the request for a zoning permit by a vote of 5-0. This was for concerns related to fire safety and a consideration of the public opposing to the idea as well. Ashmore Estates was then considered abandoned. Being an abandoned building in central Illinois, it became the target for trespassers and vandals, especially when rumors of it being haunted started.
But I don't make it a point to go in there by myself if I don't have to, especially not when the lights are off. That was not me, by the way. So my name's Ashley. I'm the caretaker, property manager, crazy lady that lives next door. So I originally came here. I was on a paranormal team out of Alton, Illinois, Riverbend Paranormal. That's the area I'm from, who were friends with Robin. And I started coming up here pretty much right after he bought it, and just came up to help clean out the building. And something about the building, not quite sure what it was, kind of drew me in and kept calling me back, and I kept coming up here and just became really good friends with Robin, and he eventually asked me to help start doing tours, and of course I said yes, even though it was a 2-hour drive. I didn't care. Started coming up because I love the place, love the people who are here. And one day I made a joke and said something about, well, if you just build a house next door, I'll just move up here. Yeah, so you should know better than to joke with Robin, first of all. And a couple, months later, he said, so what do you need, 3-bedroom, 2-bath? And I was like, what? What do you mean, 3-bedroom, 2-bath? And he's like, well, we're going to build a house. And I was like, oh, okay. And so a couple years later, here we are. And now I live next door. So it's been a very interesting adventure. But I love it. Yeah, and no, the spirits do not stay in the building. That's probably the biggest question I get asked all the time. Yes, they come to my house. Yeah, it's not just the building. They're outside. They're in the bunkhouses that we have. People have had stuff outside. I have stuff at my house. Is it my 7-foot-tall friend? Okay. That, I guess, best experience that I've had here was in the kitchen area, which is down here in this room. And it was, like I said, Sunday morning, about 10:30 in the morning. So no, it does not have to be nighttime. It does not have to be dark for stuff to happen. Especially here, I think, for me personally, most of the stuff I've had happen here has happened during the daytime, just when I'm in here cleaning or working on stuff. So like I said, this was a Sunday morning. I was in here sweeping. Started getting that, heebie-jeebie feeling of like, something's around or something's going to happen. Started hearing footsteps. And at first I thought maybe somebody was walking in. So I looked around. Nobody but me in the building. Footsteps got louder. Sounded like whoever it was had concrete boots on. I mean, I felt the footsteps. I heard them. Looked up, and about as far as probably the camera and me are sitting, saw what was about a 7-foot-tall black shadow in front of me. And at that time, fight or flight 1 and flight 1, and I took off and ran out the building.
As time went on, Ashmore Estates soon became the home to graffiti, broken windows, and busted walls. In 1998, a resident from Sullivan paid $12,500 for the property. He made the announcement that he would be renovating it and making it his home. This plan did not work out, as it was still continuously vandalized. In 2004, Michael Clean reintroduced the world to Elva Skinner, the little girl who passed away in the original almshouse due to a fire.
So back in 2003, uh, I was trying to figure out a way to incorporate my writing. I was writing a lot of fiction at the time, and I thought it would be interesting to create some historical fiction stories about kind of unusual places and events in Coles County history. That was back, a year later, I published the first edition of Tales of Coles County, and that was the whole idea behind it. And so I wanted to have one story about Ashmore Estates, and I incorporated something that I had read in I think it might have been in one of the census schedules I saw online, where there was a girl that died in a fire in the original. There was a different building back then.
He wrote in his book, The Tales of Coles County, Illinois, a story about a man named Darby and his daughter. This story took place at the Poor Farm during the Great Depression. Darby was tormented by the ghost of Elva. Since publication, many people have claimed to have experiences with this little girl.
So I incorporated her as like a ghost in the story. And then years later, people would come back to me and say that they had seen her ghost or like had encounters attributed to her ghost in Ashmore Estates. So who knows? I don't know. Maybe something there planted that seed in my brain to write that story, or somehow the story took on a life of its own. I don't know.
In 2006, Scott Kelly purchased Ashmore Estates and began renovations. His plan was different than the previous owners. Kelly started offering flashlight tours to fund the renovations for the building. To discourage trespassers, Kelly moved onto the property. His ultimate plan was to make the estate into a haunted house attraction, which opened October 13th of 2006. As the haunted house season came to an end, Kelly offered overnight stays, which were called Night of Insanity. He would feature movies, special guests, and speakers. The building started bringing in more people from the paranormal side. In the summer of 2008, Christopher and Philip Booth, producers of Spooked and Children of the Grave, filmed at Ashmore Estates. In January of 2013, Ashmore Estates was damaged in a storm. The roof was blown off and more damage was done to the building. Once again, the building was said to be beyond repair. Kelly sold the building in an auction in April of 2013 for $12,700 to Robert Burton and Ella Richards. Just over a year later, the building was owned by Robin and Norma Terry. The building was still in bad condition when the Terrys bought it, but thanks to the passion of the Terrys and the paranormal community, they were able to get the estate back to good condition. Ashmore Estates is not the only haunted location that the Terrys own, as they currently call the Haunted Art Theater in Auburn, Illinois, their home. This theater is believed to be haunted by clown performer and serial killer John Wayne Gacy, who raped, tortured, and murdered at least 33 young men and boys. Gacy was executed in 1994. Gacy is believed to be the spirit that haunts the theater. Gacy's connection to the theater comes from a purchase that Robin Terry had made. Terry had purchased an armoire that had been used to store some of the paintings that Gacy had made while he was in prison. He had made this purchase from one of John Wayne Gacy's attorneys. Robin Terry's love for the history of the site shines bright. By keeping the building alive, the history is being kept alive as well. Not only does he respect the building, but he respects the spirits who remain in the building as well. Not only does Terry honor those who lived in it while it was a care facility, he also honors those he knew personally who have passed on. On the third floor, there is a memorial room, where plaques are hung up in memory of those who have passed. There is also Hannah's room, a room dedicated to Hannah, a worker who passed away in a tragic car accident on August 28, 2020. This is a special room in Ashmore Estates. Hannah had loved this room, and to this day, it is still filled with so much love. After 107 years, Ashmore Estates still stands today and is open for tours, daytime investigations, private investigations, and special events such as Kids Day. The history of Ashmore Estates is still continuing and will continue to live on for years to come. After many trials, the building stands as strong as ever. The story of Ashmore Estates is still being wrote. Through the lens of time, we witness the echoes of memories that once filled these halls. There remains an undeniable presence in every corner of Ashmore Estates. The past is not truly gone, but waiting to be discovered. So listen closely, because the walls truly do talk. All the history that is known and unknown, it whispers. These are the whispers of Ashmore Estates. Hi, I'm Madison Hunter, and I just want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch my documentary, The Whispers of Ashmore Estates. I hope that you're able to learn something from it, whether you know a lot about the history already or not that much. I also wanted to take time out of this video to say thank you to a few people who made this video possible. I want to say thank you to Ashley. She is a caretaker at Ashmore Estates. Thank you so much for letting us come in, showing us around, and interviewing you and showing us how the investigation equipment worked. Without you, the whole paranormal side of this video would not be possible. I also want to say thank you to Rob and Terry. He is the owner of Ashmore Estates, so thank you so much for working with us, letting us film at your location, and keeping care of such a beautiful place. I also want to say thank you so much to my friends and my helpers throughout the night that stayed the night with me at Ashmore Estates. Without you, this video wouldn't be possible.